Hello, welcome back to the channel. This is a channel where we give you reviews, playthroughs, unboxings. We generally like to talk a load of bollocks about tabletop gaming in general, and in this video we're going to be talking about a classic economic, essentially it's a train game, but sort of dressed up as another type of game. We're going to be talking about Friedman Frees's Power Grid, and in this game you'll be bidding on power stations, building houses, trying to connect different cities to your power grid. It will give you money that will eventually allow you to win the game. So in this video we're going to be giving you a very brief overview of the rules, telling you what we do like, what we don't like. Then we'll come back and we'll tell you whether or not Power Grid is still worth playing 17 years after it was first released in 2004. Seems like yesterday, doesn't it? So remember, if you're new here, then please consider subscribing to this channel if you haven't already done so. Leave a comment in that section down below if you agree or disagree with our bullshit, hit the like button and all that stuff, and we'll see you after this. Bollocks. Power Grid. How'd you play this game? So Power Grid is an economic game where you'll be trying to connect different cities to your power grid. The winner of the game is the player who can power the most cities, and if there's a tie, there's a player with the most money, and if it's still a tie, then something else happens. I can't really remember what it is because it never happens, right? So Power Grid is split over a certain amount of phases, and there's also a concept in this game called steps. There's 3 steps in the game: step 1, step 2, funnily enough, step 3. But don't worry about that for a minute. We'll talk about that once we've gone through the basic rules, right? So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to determine player order. This is a little bit different in the first round, so you're just going to randomly determine it. But ordinarily, player order is determined by who has the most houses on the board, and if there's a tie, then it'll be the player who has the highest numbered power plants, right? So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to have an auction for different power plants. There will be 4 power plants in the available market, and there'll be 4 power plants in the future market. You can only buy from the available market, so don't do what everyone does and think that you can buy from the future market, right? So you'll do this in player order. The first player will choose a power plant to auction. They'll have to bid the minimum amount, so if the power plant is worth 5, you'll have to bid a minimum of 5. You can bid more if you want, but what's the point? You'll go around in a clockwise order and everyone will bid or pass. If you pass, you're out for that round, but you can come back in unless you are the person that offered the power plant up for auction. If you pass and you don't win it, then you can offer up another one once this one's gone, right? So if you win the auction, you'll put the power plant in front of you, and once everybody's passed, then you will go on to the next phase. So the next phase is the buy resources phase. There's several different types of resources. You've got coal, you've got oil, you've got trash, garbage or rubbish in the UK, and then you've got uranium, which most people refer to as nukes in this game, right? If you want to buy resources, you'll see that there is a cost printed on the board, and all you do is you'll take the cheapest amount of the resource and you will pay the cost, and then you will place these resources on the power plants that match. Different power plants require different types of resources. So for instance, nuclear power station requires uranium. There are hybrid power stations which can take 2 different things, and then there's also renewable energy which doesn't need to be powered by anything. The power plant can hold double the number of resources that is listed on the card, so it's in your interest to buy the most efficient power plant that you can. So next phase is the build phase. This will be done in reverse player order like the buy resources phase was, and what you do, you'll pay the connection cost, which is the number on the little pipeline linking the 2 cities, and then you'll pay the cost to build, which is either 10, 15 or 20 depending on whether you're in step 1, 2 or 3. You can, if you want, skip cities, but you still have to pay the connection cost. And then what you do, you place your little house onto the cities that you have built on, and then you move your house marker up on the house building track to show how many houses you've built. Once somebody has built their 7th house, or it does change depending on different player counts, then you will move into step 2. And when you do this, you'll faff about with the power plant market. You'll take a power plant out and replace it with something else, and then the 15-point spaces on the cities will be available, right? Because you can only ever have 1 of your houses in each city, and you can only build on the number that corresponds to the step that you're in. Yeah, your brain is melting and mine is 2. So next step is the bureaucracy phase. This is where you'll get money for the amount of houses that you can power. What you do, you'll look at the amount of resources you've got on your power stations. You look at how many houses your power stations can power. Then you'll declare how many of your houses you're going to power, and you'll give up those resources. And then you'll get money for the amount of houses that you power, right? So for instance, if you power 3 houses, you will get 44 electro, right? There is a sort of diminishing returns aspect to this. So the more houses you build, you will get more money, but you get less of an increase the higher up the scale you go. So again, depending on what step you're in, you'll remove a power plant from the market and you'll put it under the stack of power plants, and this will ensure that when step 3 card comes out, there will be some really nice juicy power plants available for auction in the latter stages of the game, right? Nice touch. So you keep doing this until somebody has built their 17th house. It does change according to player count, so it'd be 14 houses if you're playing with 6 players, right? And then you'll finish the building phase, and then the player who can power the most cities will be the winner of Power Grid. So what do we like about Power Grid? So the first thing that we really like about Power Grid is the minimal setup. Basically isn't any setup at all. You're going to stick the board out on the table, you're going to put some resources out into the market, chuck a few cards down, give everyone their houses, and that is it. There's none of this faffing about trying to set up all these intricate little tiny tokens, or games like Anachrony where your brain feels like it is being put into a vice. This one is just open the box up, chuck it all out, and you're done. And that's what we like. Right, so the next thing that we really like about Power Grid is the way that the turn order sort of works. You know, if you're first in turn order, then you will get the first dibs on the power plants and potentially get the best power plant, the highest number of power plant. But if you do that, if you get the highest number of power plant, that's going to make the resources and the building costs more expensive because the turn order gets reversed. So even though you might have the power plant that powers the most cities, you're going to struggle to get the resources at a decent cost to power it, and you're also going to struggle to get the best and cheapest and perhaps the most accessible cities on the map, right? You really got to find a balance between the efficiency of your power plants and the building, which ultimately generates cash, right? There's a really, really nice synergy there with these different types of mechanics. It's really well thought out and we love it. So the next thing that we really like about Power Grid is the way that the best power plants are saved for the latter stages of the game, and this ensures that you're going to have a tense and exciting finish. Like we said during the brief rules explanation, you're going to be taking the best power plant out of the game and sticking it. This means once the step 3 card has been revealed, these power plants are going to come out. You're more than likely going to have that number 50, which doesn't require any resources but power 6 cities, right? So unless somebody is completely and utterly flush and probably in the process of bankrupting themselves, the best power plants are always going to be there for your taking at the end of the game, right? So yeah, that ensures a really, really nice crescendo to this wonderful economic game, right? So what don't we like about Power Grid? So the first thing that we don't like about this game is the fact that it is a little bit too mathy, especially in the latter stages of the game. Okay, the level of maths required to get through this game is very minimal. The maths are very, very simple. But as the game goes on and your brain starts to wear down, it is kind of frustrating trying to figure out how much of one resource you're going to need, and also how much it's going to cost to power the different cities, especially if you're skipping cities. So there is a little bit of maths involved, and whilst it's not a problem at the beginning of the game, with my level of concentration and my level of endurance, I do struggle towards the end of this 3 to 4 hour game trying to figure out exactly how much I've got to pay for stuff. That might not be a problem for you, but it definitely is a problem for me, being a geriatric old fart, you know what I mean? So the second thing that we don't like about Power Grid is that there are quite a few fiddly rules to remember. It's more often than not to do with the steps, what you've got to do when these steps are triggered. These steps are triggered in different phases, so you might end up triggering step 3 in the building phase or different phases, and it's quite difficult to remember exactly what happens when and what you should be doing when that happens, right? In fact, I'm sort of confusing myself trying to explain it, and it's not going too well, is it? So let's move on. So the next thing that we don't like about Power Grid is the way that the game blocks off certain areas. It just does my head in for some bizarre reason. I know it's integral to the game, so it mixes things up and it means that the map isn't wide open, but for some reason it really does bug me seeing that area that you can't go in. You probably could get away with this in a 6-player game, but again, that would probably unbalance the game because there'd be too many areas for too many people, right? So I don't know, maybe they could shrink the map down or do something. It's just something that personally bugs me every time I dig this game out of its box. So to summarise, is Power Grid still worth your time and bother 17 bleeding years after it was first released? So we are going to give it an overwhelming yes. This is a classic Euro game that surprisingly plays really well across all player counts from 2 to 6. It can wear you down with its simple but frustrating maths element, especially towards the end of the game. But overall, this game has lost none of its power to provide a tense and exciting gaming experience if you like economic games. So there you go, that's Power Grid. Remember, if you're new here, please consider subscribing to this channel. Leave a comment in that section down below. Tell us what you think about Power Grid. Hit the like button and all that shit. We'll see you next Tuesday.